Good morning, everybody. I thought today I'd try something a little different. Partly because I honestly couldn't be bothered putting my makeup on, and two, because I've been told that my voice is quite pleasant to listen to, even with its Australian accent, or perhaps because of. So I thought I'd read a book. And of course, what better way to read a book, or what better book to read is more the point, than Edgar Allan Poe. This is a gorgeous copy I've got. Edgar Allan Poe's Tales of Mystery and Madness. And it's illustrated by Gris Grimly. So I thought I would actually, see, look, there he is there. As in, that's Edgar. And there's his madness floating on his head. So I thought I'd read you a story. Just let me have a little sip of my gorgeous mocha that I'm having today with almond milk. Thank you very much. And some Montezuma's 100% chocolate with orange oil. Oh, it's so good. Anyway, so I hope you are going to enjoy this. Relax, pop your feet up, get yourself a cup of tea, and listen to the stories of Edgar Allan Poe. I got this book back in 2004 because I thought the illustrations were gorgeous. And I hope you do too. I'm taking my idea of this from Queenie Black, who decided to do a reading, and I thought, why not? We need some more Australian voices on the internet as well. So in this book there are 4 stories, and the first one I thought I would read today, which is The Black Cat. And here it is. I hope you're ready. For the most wild yet homely narrative I am about to pen, I neither expect nor solicit belief. Mad indeed would I be to expect it, in a case where my very senses reject their own evidence. Yet mad am I not, and very surely do I not dream. But tomorrow I die, and today I would unburden my soul. From my infancy, I was noted for the docility and humanity of my disposition. I was especially fond of animals, and was indulged by my parents with a great variety of pets. With these I spent most of my time, and never was so happy as when feeding and caressing them. This peculiarity of character grew with my growth, and in my manhood I derived from it one of my principal sources of pleasure. I married early, and was happy to find in my wife a disposition not uncongenial to my own. Observing my partiality for domestic pets, she lost no opportunity of procuring those of the most agreeable kind. We had birds, goldfish, a fine dog, rabbits, a small monkey, and a cat. This latter was a remarkably large and beautiful animal, entirely black and sagacious to an astonishing degree. Pluto, this was the cat's name, was my favourite pet and playmate. I alone fed him, and he attended me wherever I went about the house. Our friendship lasted in this manner for several years, during which my general temperament and character, through the instrumentality of the fiend intemperance, had experienced a radical alteration for the worse. I grew day by day more moody, more irritable, more regardless of the feelings of others. I suffered myself to use intemperate language to my wife. My pets, of course, were made to feel the change in my disposition. I not only neglected, but ill-used them. For Pluto, however, I still retained sufficient regard to restrain me from maltreating him. But my disease grew upon me, for what disease is like alcohol? And at length, even Pluto began to experience the effects of my ill temper. One night, returning home much intoxicated from one of my haunts about town, I fancied that the cat avoided my presence. I seized him when, in his fright at my violence, he inflicted a slight wound upon my hand with his teeth. The fury of a demon instantly possessed me. I knew myself no longer. I took from my waistcoat a penknife, grasped the poor beast by the throat, and deliberately cut one of its eyes from the socket. When reason returned in the morning, I experienced a sentiment half of horror, half of remorse, for the crime of which I had been guilty. But it was at best a feeble and equivocal feeling, and the soul remained untouched. I soon drowned in wine all memory of the deed. In the meantime, the cat slowly recovered. The socket of the lost eye presented, it is true, a frightful appearance, but he no longer appeared to suffer any pain. He went about the house as usual, but, as might be expected, fled in extreme terror at my approach. I had enough of my old heart left as to be at first grieved by this evident dislike on the part of a creature which had once so loved me. But this feeling soon gave way to irritation, and then came the spirit of perverseness. Who has not 100 times found himself committing a vile or stupid action for no other reason than because he knows he should not? The spirit of perverseness, I say, came to be my final overthrow. It was this unfathomable longing of the soul to vex itself, to do wrong for the wrong's sake only, that urged me to continue and finally consummate the injury I had inflicted upon the unoffending brute. One morning, in cold blood, I slipped a noose around its neck and hung it to the limb of a tree, hung it with the tears streaming from my eyes and with the bitterest remorse in my heart. Hung it because I knew that it had loved me, and because I felt it had given me no reason of offence. Hung it because I knew that in so doing I was committing a sin, a deadly sin, that would so jeopardize my immortal soul as to place it even beyond the reach of infinite mercy. On the night of the day on which this most cruel deed was done, I was aroused from sleep by the cry of "Fire!" The curtains of my bed were in flames. The whole house was blazing. It was with great difficulty that my wife and myself made our escape. The destruction was complete. My entire worldly wealth was swallowed up, and I resigned myself henceforth to despair. I am above the weakness of seeking to establish a sequence of cause and effect between the disaster and the atrocity, but I am detailing a chain of facts and wish not to leave even a possible link imperfect. On the day succeeding the fire, I visited the ruins. The walls, with one exception, had fallen in. This exception was found in a wall not very thick, which stood about the middle of the house, and against which had rested the head of my bed. The plastering had here resisted the action of the fire, a fate which I attributed to its having been recently spread. About this wall a dense crowd was collected, and many persons seemed to be examining a particular portion of it with a very minute and eager attention. I approached and saw, as if graven in bas-relief upon the white surface, the figure of a gigantic cat. There was a rope around the animal's neck. When I first beheld this apparition, my wonder and my terror were extreme. I went so far as to regret the loss of the animal, and to look about me among the vile haunts which I now habitually frequented for another pet of the same species and of somewhat similar appearance with which to supply its place. One night, as I sat half stupefied in a den of more than infamy, my attention was suddenly drawn to some black object, reposing upon the head of one of the immense hogsheads of gin or rum which constituted the chief furniture of the apartment. It was a cat, a very large one, fully as large as Pluto and closely resembling him in every respect but one. Pluto had not a white hair upon any portion of his body, but this cat had a large, although indefinite, splotch of white covering nearly the whole region of the breast. Upon my touching him, he immediately arose, purred loudly, rubbed against my hand, and appeared delighted at my notice. This, then, was the very creature of which I was in search. I at once offered to purchase it from the landlord, but this person had no claim to it, knew nothing of it, had never seen it before. I continued my caresses, and, when I prepared to go home, the animal evinced a disposition to accompany me. I permitted it to do so, occasionally stooping and patting it as I proceeded. When it reached the house, it domesticated itself at once and became immediately a great favourite with my wife. For my own part, I soon found a dislike to it arising within me. This was just the reverse of what I had anticipated, but its evident fondness for myself rather disgusted and annoyed me. By slow degrees, these feelings of disgust and annoyance rose into the bitterness of hatred. I avoided the creature. A certain sense of shame and the remembrance of my former deed of cruelty prevented me from physically abusing it, but gradually I came to look upon it with unutterable loathing. What added, no doubt, to my hatred of the beast was the discovery on the morning after I brought it home that, like Pluto, it also had been deprived of one of its eyes. This circumstance, however, only endeared it to my wife. With my aversion to this cat, however, its particularly for myself seemed to increase. It followed my footsteps with a pertinacity that would be difficult to make the reader comprehend. Whenever I sat, it would spring upon my knees, covering me with its loathsome caresses. If I arose to walk, it would go between my feet and thus nearly throw me down, or, fastening its long and sharp claws in my dress, clamber to my breast. At such times, although I longed to destroy it with a blow, I was yet withheld from so doing, partly by a memory of my former crime, but chiefly, let me confess it at once, by absolute dread of the beast. This dread was not exactly a dread of physical evil, and yet I should be at loss how otherwise to define it. I'm almost ashamed to own, yes, even in this felon's cell, I am almost ashamed to own that the terror and the horror with which the animal inspired me had been heightened by one of the merest chimeras it would be possible to conceive. My wife had called my attention more than once to the character of the marks of white hair, of which I have spoken, and which constituted the sole visible difference between the strange beast and the one I had destroyed. The reader will remember that this mark, although large, had been originally very indefinite, but by slow degrees, which for a long time my reason struggled to reject as fanciful, it had assumed a rigorous distinctness of outline, of a hideous, of a ghostly thing, ghastly thing, of the gallows. And now was I indeed wretched beyond the wretchedness of mere humans. Alas, neither by day nor by night knew I the blessing of rest any more. During the former, the creature left me no moment alone, and in the latter I started hourly from dreams of unutterable fear to find the hot breath of the thing upon my face, and its vast weight, an incarnate nightmare that I had no power to shake off, incumbent eternally upon my heart. Beneath the pressure of torments such as these, the feeble remnant of the good within me succumbed. Evil thoughts became my sole intimates, the darkest and the most evil of thoughts. to sudden, frequent and ungovernable outbursts of fury to which I now blindly abandoned myself, my uncomplaining wife, alas, was the most usual and the most patient of sufferers. One day she accompanied me upon some household errand into the cellar of the old building that our poverty compelled us to inhabit. The cat followed me down the steep steps and, nearly throwing me headlong, exasperated me to madness. Uplifting an axe and forgetting in my wrath the childish dread which had hitherto stayed my hand, I aimed a blow at the animal, which, of course, would have proved instantly fatal had it descended as I wished. But this blow was arrested by the hand of my wife. Goaded by the interference into a rage more than demoniacal, I withdrew my arm from her grasp and buried the axe in her brains. She fell dead upon the spot. This hideous murder accomplished, I set myself forthwith to the task of concealing the body. I knew that I could not remove it from the house, either by day or by night, without risk of being observed by the neighbours. Many projects entered my mind. At one period I thought of cutting the corpse into minute fragments and destroying them by fire. At another I resolved to dig a grave for it in the floor of the cellar. I deliberated about casting it into a well in the yard, about packing it in a box, as if merchandise, and so getting a porter to take it from the house. Finally, I hit upon what I considered a far better expedient than any of those. I determined to wall it up in the cellar, as the monks of the Middle Ages are recorded to have walled up their victims. For a purpose such as this, the cellar was well adapted. Its walls were loosely constructed and had lately been plastered throughout with a rough plaster, which the dampness of the atmosphere had prevented from hardening. Moreover, in one of the walls was a projection caused by a false chimney or fireplace that had been filled up and made to resemble the rest of the cellar. I made no doubt that I could readily displace the bricks at this point, insert the corpse, and wall the thing up as before, so that no eye could detect anything suspicious. In this calculation I was not deceived, and by means of a crowbar I easily dislodged the bricks, and having carefully deposited the body against the inner wall, with little trouble I relaid the whole structure as it originally stood. Having procured mortar, sand, and hair, with every possible precaution I prepared a plaster, which could not be distinguished from the old, and with this I very carefully went over the new brickwork. When I had finished, I felt satisfied that all was right. The wall did not present the slightest appearance of having been disturbed. The rubbish on the floor was picked up with the minutest care. My next step was to look for the beast which had been the cause of so much wretchedness, for I had at length firmly resolved to put it to death. But it appeared that the crafty animal had been alarmed at the violence of my previous anger, and forbore to present itself in my present mood. It is impossible to describe or to imagine the deep, blissful sense of relief that the absence of the detested creature occasioned my bosom. I soundly and tranquilly slept, even with the burden of murder upon my soul. The second and third day passed, and still my tormentor came not. Once again I breathed as a free man. The monster, in terror, had fled the premises forever. I should behold it no more. My happiness was supreme. The guilt of my dark deed disturbed me but little. Upon the fourth day of the assassination, a party of police came, very unexpectedly, into the house. Secure, however, in the inscrutability of my place of concealment, I felt no embarrassment whatsoever. The officers bade me accompany them in their search. They left no nook or corner unexposed and unexplored. At length they descended into the cellar. I quivered not a muscle. My heart beat calmly as that of one who slumbers in innocence. I folded my arms upon my bosom and roamed the cellar easily from end to end. The police were thoroughly satisfied and prepared to depart. The glee at my heart was too strong to be restrained. I burned to say but one word by way of triumph, and to render doubly sure their assurance of my guiltlessness. "Gentlemen," I said at last as the party ascended the steps, "I delight to have allayed your suspicions. I wish you all health and a little more courtesy. By the by, gentlemen, this is a very well-constructed house." In the rapid desire to say something easily, I scarcely knew what I uttered at all. "These walls— are you going, gentlemen? These walls are solidly put together." And here, through the mere frenzy of bravado, I rapped heavily with a cane that I held in my hand upon the very portion of brickwork behind which stood the corpse of the wife of my bosom. But may God shield and deliver me from the fangs of the arch-fiend. No sooner had the reverberation of my blows sank into silence than I was answered by a voice within the tomb. A cry, at first muffled and broken, like the sobbing of a child, and then quickly swelling into one long, loud, and continuous scream, utterly anomalous and inhuman, a howl, a wailing shriek, half of horror and half of triumph. Of my own thoughts it is folly to speak. Swooning, I staggered to the opposite wall. For one instant the party on the stairs remained motionless. Through extremity of terror and of awe, in the next, half a dozen stout arms were toiling at the wall. It fell bodily. The corpse, already greatly decayed and allotted with gore, stood erect before the eyes of the spectators. Upon its head sat the hideous beast whose craft had seduced me into murder, and whose informing voice had consigned me to the hangman. I had walled the monster up within the tomb. And there we are. I hope you enjoyed this story. The next one I will read in the next video will be The Mask of the Red Death. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. I try and put out videos weekly, and I think this might be something to do again. Take care.